Hey there, wine fans. It's Wine Shark with you here again today to talk about wine storage basics. We're going to talk about short and long-term wine storage. So, to begin, short-term storage. This is what we talk about when we have leftover wine. If you're like me, you're a sommelier, you may find that a 750 milliliter bottle is a single serving size, but if you happen to have a little bit of restraint and have some left over, you're going to have some wine that we need to talk about. Now, if you've ever done this before and you've corked up your wine and set it on the countertop, you'll notice that when you come back to it the next day, it doesn't quite taste the same. The reason is, from the moment we open a bottle of wine, it begins to change. It begins to oxidize and it begins to evaporate. Okay? Those two factors at work, especially oxidation, can change the way a wine tastes. So what is oxidation? Or you may also hear it pronounced oxidation. Both are correct. Oxidation is the interaction of oxygen with a chemical compound. Okay? Specifically in your wine, what it does is it causes a change in the fresh flavor of your wines. You may see this as in a perfect example if you take something like a fresh apple, cut an apple in half and leave it on the countertop for a few minutes. What begins to happen? Well, it begins to brown. That's the same effect. Oxygen is a very volatile molecule. It is aggressive and it interacts well with other things. And so that oxygen changes what's going on. So we want to protect against that. So how do we do it? Well, the simplest method is to remember to re-cork your wine. If you have nothing else, this is at least better than nothing. You don't leave the wine open to the open air, but at least put that cork back in there. Okay? Number two, or probably a better method, and inexpensive, very effective, and the one that I use here at home, is called the vacuum. Okay? A vacuum is a little cork that's a one-way valve that you can see the holes in it right there. That one-way valve has a pump, and you can pump the air out of the bottle. That removes the air and creates a semi-vacuum inside and slows the process of oxidation. Doesn't halt it completely, but it gets it pretty close. You might also see another example, something like this. Okay, wine preservatives are these wine cans. Very light, you'll notice. It said this is a lighter, it's a heavier than air inert gas. I believe they used to use argon. And that inert gas you spray inside the bottle with this tiny little straw, and it forms a layer on the wine layer between that and the air. It sinks to the wine surface and creates a buffer between the oxygen-laden air and the no oxygen wine, preventing that oxidation from happening. You also might see some more complicated examples, things like the Coravine. Coravine is a needle-like device that sits on the side of the bottle. It grips the neck and sticks a needle through the cork so that you only pour wine out with no exposure to oxygen to the wine inside whatsoever. You might see some of these at high-end restaurants where they use it to pour expensive wines by the glass without risking the wine inside. Okay, so they keep it from that oxidation. Okay, so those are some examples. Also, though, you want to make sure that if you're using a sparkling wine, we take a slightly different approach. This is an example of a sparkling wine cork. What it does is you'll see that cap in there, when this latches down on the neck, that rubber cork swells out and provides an even tighter seal than either one of these without taking air out of the bottle. In fact, it's keeping the CO2 in so that the wine stays nice and bubbly. Okay, so you got to use that if you're using something like Champagne, Cremant, Cava, Prosecco, Zect, etc. Okay? The second thing we can do, now that we've taken the air out of the equation, is we want to work with the wine's temperature. We want to refrigerate that wine. Refrigeration slows oxidation. You'll notice this if you did the same thing. If you took that apple, if you put it on the countertop versus the refrigerator, you'd find that the countertop one oxidizes and turns brown faster. So controlling that temperature, whether it's red or white wine, put it in the refrigerator. You just have to be ready to wait for that wine to come back up to temperature. If you take a red wine, pour it in a glass, it's going to take maybe 10 minutes to be up to the proper temperature. So a little bit of patience will help you have a better, fresher product on day 2, 3, or 4. That, by the way, is about all I recommend, that you let those wines sit. After about 4 days, none of these tools can really stop that inevitable kind of trend of wine changing through oxidation process. Okay, so you are on a clock. Okay, that, by the way, applies to normal still wines. Fortified wines can take a little bit longer. We'll cover details on that when we talk about fortified wines specifically. Next, let's talk about wine in long term. In other words, having wine on hand, sitting in your house. You want to have some bottles so that you can just run and grab one from your cellar. If you're not so fortunate as to have your separate wine cellar, what is a normal folk like us to do? Well, one, you can buy yourself a fairly inexpensive wine cellar refrigerator. That's what I have. It holds about 32 bottles, costs about $300, and I am able to store most of the wine that I'm storing either long-term or just ready for day-to-day drinking. But if you don't even have that, where in your house can you store your wines? Let's talk about the main factors that we're trying to protect against for wine term storage. First, we want consistent temperature. Okay, consistency, not necessarily an accurate number, but a consistent number. It's better to have something that's at, say, 65 degrees year-round than to put it somewhere where it's 32 in the winter and 85 in the summer. Okay, the wine needs a consistency, so the less that varies, the better off you are. Number two, we want a humid but not wet environment. If we are using natural cork, we need that humidity to help keep the cork swell. Too dry air, these dry out. Too much oxygen goes in and out of the bottle. It fails at the storage process. We don't want that. Low light to no light. Light, especially UV light, is destructive to wine. Sunlight is especially bad. So wine can get destroyed by sunlight in a matter of minutes. Okay, you can actually count the minutes before you actually see the light strike on wine. It's not a good thing. So fluorescent light also isn't very good for long-term storage. We want incandescent light at the best, but generally speaking, darkness is great. This is why a closet that is interior to your home that doesn't vary in temperature a lot is probably a pretty good candidate for a wine rack. Next, we want to stay away from strong odors. Make sure that closet doesn't have anything like mothballs in it. You don't want to store it next to any strong detergents or cleaners, things like that. Remember what we said in the cork episode, these are porous. Oxygen does transfer in and out, or gases rather transfer in and out, and that includes odor compounds as well. So you don't want your wine tasting like mothballs when you open it up 5 years from now. Last, if you're going to store for long-term, vibration is a consideration. Most of us are fortunate enough not to have this problem, but if you happen to live next to something like, say, a railway or a subway line, that subtle vibration every day when that train rolls by that you barely notice is really not good for your long-term wine storage. It causes the wine to wake up again, and it doesn't allow it to do its nice, restful, sleeping job that we tried so hard to get it to do, to let it mature. So that's another minor consideration for most of us. Temperature, humidity, light, no odors, no vibration. Those 5 factors are what you want to be looking for. So set that wine rack in a nice interior closet. You'll be great. Just keep it away from, mothballs and cedar chests. So thanks again. This has been your Wine Basics short. I want to thank you guys for your viewership. And thank you for the growth that we've seen so far. I want you to like, comment, and subscribe below. Hit that bell so you'll be notified of all of our new content. We're looking for weekly wine basics and more. And share with a wine-loving friend. We'd love to see you guys around. If you'd like to support us on Patreon or visit us on Facebook, there's links below in the description. And we hope to see you guys soon. So until then, cheers.